Welcome to Handcrafting Your Retirement with Brett Ramsey from Artisan Wealth Strategies. In this podcast, we help retirees as well as those who are considering retirement overcome generic wealth management advice that limits your future. We do this by handcrafting customized financial strategies centered on your unique lifestyle. Jump on board for this journey where we delve into strategies that can help make your money outlast you, as Brett draws from years of experience with guest experts to eliminate cookie-cutter saving strategies.
Hello and welcome to Handcrafting Your Retirement with your host, Brett Ramsey, where we talk about what you want in retirement and how to make it happen. I'm Wendy McConnell. Hi, Brett. It's been a while. How are you?
I'm doing very well. How are you, Wendy?
I'm good. I am really missed story time with you. You're so good at telling stories, and I know that you've probably got a big one for me today.
Well, I've got a good one, and our guest is actually a far better storyteller than I, so I'm excited about today's episode as well. But what I found is that in life, sometimes you meet people and you're not ready or expecting to meet them, and that's a little bit how Dean and I met. We met at a time of life, really where we didn't get a chance to get to know each other very well because it was COVID and we were all isolated from one another. But have you ever just met someone and you weren't expecting to meet them? So recently I went to pick up my son for breakfast, and he told me that he was bringing one of his dorm mates from school with us to breakfast. And it's Arthur, and Arthur's from Germany. And I'd met Arthur before, and I was very excited because Arthur is a blast. He's got great stories and he's an interesting guy. Did you know that he was on the European Voice? Like, he was a winner of like the Voice, the show. Like, he made it like 4 chairs turned for him. So he's a neat, fascinating young fellow, right? So I'm waiting outside his dorm, and it's raining, and all of a sudden this couple starts walking towards my rental car, and I look under the umbrella and I notice it's Arthur, and he's with a young lady, and I'm like, hey, Arthur's got a girlfriend. That's pretty cool. I'm ready to ask him about that. And so they're standing outside the car, and there's this older gentleman walking down the street as well in the rain under an umbrella. And all of a sudden, the older gentleman gets in the back of my rental car, and then Arthur and this girl get in the back of my rental car, but my son is not yet in the rental car. Okay. So during this entire process, I don't know who the people are that just got in my rental car other than Arthur. And my assumption is that this is his girlfriend and some random dude walking down the street.
They liked your car.
They liked my car because it was dry and it was a rainy, miserable morning, right? And we were going for brunch. As it turned out, my assumption about the people that I was meeting was completely wrong, because it wasn't Arthur's girlfriend. It was Arthur's sister and his dad, who I'd never met before. I'd met Arthur's mother at orientation to school. But so sometimes you just meet people and you're surprised, right? Because you don't really know what to expect. And so I think when I first met Dean, that was a little bit of the situation. We'd kind of met, but we really didn't know each other very well. And then the next thing I know, because of COVID and the circumstances with which we met at Waddell and Reed, all of a sudden we're sharing office space together and basically kind of like doing life, but we just didn't really know each other. So today, I really want our listeners to get to know Dean because he's a fascinating guy. He's got great stories, and quite frankly, he's got a lot of things that can help our listeners because he's had a lot of great experiences during the course of his career. So with that, I'd really like to just introduce Dean and let him give us a little bit of his background and share us a little bit about who he is and how he got to where he is today.
Sure. What would you like to know?
Well, let's just start with, how did you end up like finding financial planning and financial advising as a career path? I know you had a different start to this journey than some, so maybe you can share that background with us.
I graduated college in 1984, so that makes me this many years old. But I didn't really have a plan. I had a degree, and I had a new best friend. I had just met him that year, and we just hit it off, and we're still friends today. And we live about 5 miles apart in Florida in the winter. And he went to work for an airline in Indianapolis called American Transair. And he was a flight attendant. And I was just starting the interview process and, looking for jobs. And he said, well, why don't you just go interview with them? Just a practice interview. And I said, okay. So I went over there, and the guy was nice, and we had a talk. And they were interviewing for flight attendants. And I didn't even know what a flight attendant was, to be honest. I'd been on a plane one time. Okay, so I'd never really experienced that. And so I came back to the dorm, and I told my buddy this is how it went. And then they called me the next day and said, "Hey, we'd like for you to come to work for us." And so I talked to him and I said, what are you planning? And he's like, "Well, let's just do it for 6 months and run around a little bit." And we had a friend that had worked for ATA for a year. And he would come back with stories of, I spent a week in Tenerife, or I was here in Paris, or I was here. And so it sounded pretty glamorous. And being a small town boy, which, I'd been to Roswell, New Mexico, because my grandmother lived there, I thought, well, let's try it. So I did. And so I did that for, I think about 3.5 years was what it ended up being. But I met my current wife, 36 years. And as we were planning on getting married, she said, "Somebody's going to need to get a real job, and I think it's you." And so that kind of spurred me to start to look for, what opportunities are out there for me. And to be honest, I answered an ad in the Indianapolis Star, and so I met with the guy. Rob Abernathy was his name, and he was new to town, and he had taken over an office here for Waddell and Reed, and we hit it off. And what I didn't know that was that he would end up really being a mentor to me, and making all the difference in me, first of all, surviving, and then ultimately making it in the business. But when he spoke to me, he talked a lot about the ability to make a difference in people's lives. And that was interesting to me. I've always been a pleaser, so to speak. And so I want people to be happy, and I want to be able to help them. And I think that was uh, it wasn't the financial aspect as much as it was the ability to make a difference. So that's how I got there.
Yeah, so it's a great start to the process, and I know that you mentioned your mentor at Waddell and Reed, and in that process, maybe you can kind of walk us through. I know you had quite a few different roles and responsibilities and steps along the way before you kind of created the practice that you're in today. So walk us through some of those experiences. I know at one point in time, at least you were in Louisville, Kentucky, and had some other things that you did. And I find those stories very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think back when I started as a financial advisor, it was a very different world than it is today. And I enjoyed the work and I enjoyed the process, but for some reason, I thought it made sense with my background to go into some sort of management. Okay. And that was a career path that would, ultimately be rewarding and successful over time. And so after, actually, it was 2 years, Rob said, "Hey, why don't you help me as an assistant manager?" And in that, you would have a role of now training new people on some of the things that you've learned, and also working with them on cases, kind of just a new junior mentor role. And so I did, and we had success with that. And a couple of years later, it was actually 1993, they asked me to move to Louisville, Kentucky. And that really wasn't on my list as places that I wanted to move to. Well, and we ended up liking Louisville very much, and really thought that that would be where we would spend the rest of our lives. We had a great church there, a great community, and the office was doing very well. So that was, all those things were good. Then in 2002, the branch manager of the Indianapolis office passed away suddenly. And so my boss at the time just said, "Hey, do you want to go back to Indianapolis?" And although it wasn't a promotion, it was just a lateral move. Our parents were here and they were aging, and we just thought maybe that makes more sense to go back to Indy. Okay. So we did, and I was back in Indy from 1993 until 2010 as the branch manager. But around 2007, my senior advisor came to me and he said, "I'm thinking about retiring at some point, and I'd like for you to take over my clients. And so I don't know if you would do that, but I would like that." And I'd always thought that someday I would go back to being an advisor. And so, although I didn't know when that was going to happen, I said, yes, I think I probably would do that. I did say, hey, when are you going to retire? And he said, I have no idea. Okay. So we just left it at that. We had the downturn in 08, 09, and in October of 09, things were starting to get better. And he came back to me and said, hey, I think it's time. And I said, time for what? And he said, well, I think I'm going to retire. And I said, okay. And he said, are you ready? And I said, well, let me think about it. When do you plan on actually retiring? He said, December. So as shocking as that was, I talked to my wife and we decided to make that change. And so in 2010, I went back to my initial role as financial advisor, working back again with clients. So that's just kind of been the same ever since.
Well, that's quite a journey and a little bit unexpected at times. And but would you say that opportunity to get back into the direct relationship with the clients was that the most pivotal or the most scary moment of your career, maybe?
Yes, it would be both. I think that one of the things I realized in the branch management position was I missed the interaction with clients, and to this day, that's my favorite part about the business is understanding who they are and trying to help them make decisions and be that person for them. But at the same time, because I didn't know any of the clients, and my predecessor had a pretty large client base, it was scary because I didn't know where to go because I didn't know their story, and so it was a challenge for a good couple of years, to be honest, really trying to get some understanding of how they think and what's important to them. And so I do think it was pivotal in the fact that I really enjoyed it in the end, but it was scary to the extent that every meeting was a brand new day. And so it wasn't like they'd been clients for years, even though they had. So yeah.
Well, and over the last, 14 years, I'm sure you've seen a lot of change in terms of not just the conversations that you're having with the clients, but how you help them and the things that you do for them. Maybe you can kind of share with us some of the kind of the milestones or the moments where you started seeing kind of a shift in your role as advisor and how you help clients and the things that you do now that maybe when you first started, you didn't think you were going to get to do.
I think again, that's just about learning the client. Certainly at Waddell and Reed, we had a certain toolbox that we use consistently, and so there wasn't the opportunities or availability of new things to use that we have with LPL. But I do think that part of the helping was more experience with them and more experience with me. As I got older, it was easier for me to talk about some of the things that they were thinking about or that they were looking for guidance on. Whereas when you're a brand new person, it's difficult to talk to a 65-year-old getting ready to, hey, I'm going to call it my last day at work. So I think over time, what we did or our conversations were different because their life changes were happening. So I think that's just kind of over 14 years, their strategy, their objectives, it's enough time for things to change. And you see them accomplish goals, you see them do things that they wanted to do. And I think those conversations and then what comes after that is, it's exciting and fun to talk about.
Well, some of those exciting things over 14 years, you've probably seen some of those key life events. And uh, what are the ones where maybe a story of a client where you saw them kind of hit a goal that maybe at first they didn't think they were going to get, and you kind of helped them get there? Or, just the joy that you see from a client accomplishing that retirement goal when maybe they never thought they would get there. Maybe share a story about a client that you've seen do that during your past 14 years.
Sure. There's a lot of stories. I think if you want to talk in and think about somebody who didn't think they were going to make it happen. To be honest, one of my earliest clients was a neighbor, and his wife actually babysat for our oldest daughter, who's now 32. And one day he asked me about what I did. And so we struck up a conversation, and so he started saving money with me and at Waddell and Reed. And Don was his name, and Don was a hard worker. He worked in a manufacturing plant. He was kind of the go-to guy for all the machinery, right? And so um, Don never had a big salary, but he was consistent with his savings, and they had a good program at work. And we would talk about retiring someday, and he would always say, "I'm never going to get to retire. I'm never going to get to retire." And I would say, well, let's keep saving because I want to make sure Karen can retire if you're not going to retire. So uh, over the years, I dealt with Don's reluctance to understand that he was doing a good job. All right. And the funny part about it was he came to me one time and he was frustrated, and he was in his early 60s and he was really ready to retire, and he could, but he wouldn't commit to it. And he said, work's crazy and they won't leave me alone. And I said, just Don, next time you do that, say, I don't need this job. Tell them. Okay. And maybe maybe they'll be a little nicer to you at work, but he didn't, because he wasn't ready to retire. Okay. But ultimately, when the time came, and it took some proving with the numbers to him that it was all going to be good, he retired. And to this day, he has more money. They have more money than they can spend. Okay, they truly do, based on their lifestyle. And recently, he called to get some money, and I didn't take the call. He talked to Alex, and Alex has dealt with him for a few years, and he said, I need this amount of money, and he said, tell Dean it's to buy a new boat. I'm actually spending some money. And one of the things that is difficult, I think, for some of the retirees is that if they've done a good job of saving, is turning on the spending habit. Okay, because that's how they got all the money. But he was excited, and again, I think he never realized how well he was doing until it came time to be able to retire, and then he realized, hey, I'm in really good position. So anyway, he's my longest term client. And so he's been 36 years.
Wow. You got to see a whole lot of the growth, not only of his money, but just him. And I think you're hitting on something that I think is really important, is that, as our clients go through these life events, as they hit these different milestones, sometimes their thinking has to change, right? So it was hard. He spent his whole life saving, and sometimes it's hard to enjoy the fruits of your labor. And for him, maybe it was that fishing boat or whatever it was, but he's finally kind of enjoying it. When you kind of think about your clients now, are there certain challenges that they are facing that you would didn't, like, they didn't necessarily, they could anticipate it, but they didn't really want to think about it? So what are some of maybe the hard challenges and hard conversations you're having with clients now that are creating the biggest kind of concern in them, where you're able to really help them kind of navigate something that's challenging to them?
Well, certainly as the clients age, the conversation with their children or their heirs becomes a milestone for them. When do they do that? Do they do that? Do they want to have that conversation? And a lot of people don't. But I think as a conversation, it's a very meaningful one, because you wonder, hey, they think about, let's just a recent example, they have two children, and the children are different levels of success. And so how do we treat, handing what we've accumulated, and pass it on to them in a way that makes sense for both of them. And so I think those types of conversations are certainly what I have more and more of now. because again, that they realize they're not going to outlive their money. And so, how do we pass it on to the kids? And my biggest, the biggest challenge sometimes I have is I try to get them to give away money sooner rather than later, whether that's in the way of participating in travel with them or doing other types of things. But again, it comes back to it's hard to break those old habits. And it's also hard to just say, okay, hey, I need to hang on to this because I might need it. But I think those are the most interesting conversations now because and not just it's not just their wishes. It's okay. Hey, they're really thinking about each kid and making it specialized for each one of them. So I think those are the conversations I enjoy now.
Yeah, that kind of customizing it gets back to Artisan. It was really your brainchild and your background and the handcrafting. And I think that, we didn't come across that name by accident. And getting to work with people and really getting to do those custom solutions that really answer the questions that are biggest questions for them and their family. I know how important that is for you and why you took such care in creating the name and even the logo. Maybe you could share with us a little bit, because I think the handcrafted nature of the logo and the things that are your passion speaks very, very much to who you are. Maybe you could kind of tell us the story of the origin of that.
Sure. I grew up in a household. My dad was an entrepreneur. He was a small businessman, but he was also an investor in small houses in the town that we lived in. And so he ended up owning, I don't know, a number of rental houses, but we did all the work ourselves. And so I grew up, becoming a handyman and enjoying working on projects and working in the wood shop. And so I've always enjoyed making things and seeing the end result. And out of my three children, the first two can't draw stick figures, and the third one is an artist. And I remember when we took her to kind of a career counseling meeting in high school, and the counselor at the end of the session really said, you've got an artist there. She's going to be an artist, and she is. And so ultimately, she was in her senior year at out in Colorado in college, and I said, "Hey, I need a logo." And I said, "Would you mind just putting something together for me?" And said, "I have no idea, what it should look like," but she just hand drew the current logo, and that's how we got it. Currently, she said that was one of my Christmas presents. Was she made me a set of mugs with the hand done logo carved into the mugs, and so anyway, that was how all that came about.
Well, and uh, I think Dean's modest as well. I mean, almost every detail of the office, down to Christmas decorations and everything, is his doing. He has quite the knack and the touch for the details. And I think that, as you're thinking about, you mentioned some of the journey that you've helped your clients go on, and I know you've gone on your own journey. You've shared the kind of the beginning of the journey of your career with us, and now as you're kind of transitioning towards the end part of your career, are there kind of words or wisdom that you would leave for kind of the next generation of people that are stepping into your shoes? What do you think are the most important things to focus on as we move forward here at Artisan?
Well, if you're referring to, someone becoming a financial advisor, I think the biggest thing is you have to have a passion for the people. Tools are great, products are great, but if you don't really care about the clients, if they don't see that, then you're probably not going to really enjoy the process itself. I think one of the things that is different today, because there's so many avenues to get financial advice, with certainly with the internet, and um, I think what sometimes people lose sight of is that people make financial decisions differently than they make other types of decisions. And I'd asked a young guy, a couple, 3 years ago about, his experience. And I said, so if there's a new app, on your phone for investing, I said, would that be more successful for you, or would it be better just to talk to somebody? And he came back and said, the apps are great. And I said, the challenge is they don't keep track, and they don't understand why you're making this decision. And I think, as a new person in the business, the challenge is you have to have the courage to give advice and have the tough conversations. But that's what gets people started. We've all been in a position where, we really wanted to do something, but we just never got started. And a lot of that was there was just no accountability. There was nobody else that knew. And so, I think in the business today, new advisors really have to commit that they're going to do that they're going to understand, and they're going to work to be that person for people. I think sometimes they think, oh, well, this software is going to make a difference, or this process is going to make a difference. And, the old saying, they need to know how much you care, is true. And that sometimes takes time. I think that the business is different. I think you almost always have to start on a team today. And when I started my success, most people failed. And so I do remember my mentor actually being at my parents' dining room table with us having dinner. And my dad looks at me and said, I can't believe he's making it. And, that didn't make me feel super at the time. But my dad knew that I was a shy person as a whole. And so he didn't see this type of career as being something that would necessarily be a perfect fit. But at the same time, I think that I was willing to ask people to take action. And I found it as a motivator to me, certainly when they did. It helped me feel like I've made a difference. It helped me to feel good. And I think that over time, then when the actual events happen that we're saving for, like we mentioned before, then it's great because you get to experience that with them. So, but again, it's not an easy career, and it's one that is very rewarding, but certainly much harder in the beginning than it is in the end.
Yes, no, but think of all the hundreds of lives that you've touched during the course of your career already, and the impact that you're having. And I think that, caring and the people-centric part of it is why you've had the success that you've had during your career, and why I've enjoyed being a part of that process over the last 4 years, and getting to know you and the way in which you care for those that you work with. And really, Wendy, I think that's kind of our perfect segue here today for what we wanted to share with our audience is, as you know, we kind of always talk about, you always ask me that magic question, Wendy, is, okay, now what happens? So, as Dean said, what happens is we need to get to know you. So you got to reach out to us and connect with us and allow us to spend some time getting to know you so that we can handcraft your strategies. That's what we're about. That's what our team is about. And that's what we care about here at Artisan Wealth Strategies.
Well, I wanted to say thank you to you both. It was very nice getting to know Dean. And how do we get in touch with either one of you?
Well, the first thing you got to go to sometimes is that magic World Wide Web place out there. But I know it's a mouthful and a lot to type, but just type artisanwealthstrategies.com and you'll find our website, and you'll be able to find our direct phone numbers and our emails and be able to connect with us. And like I said, let's just spend some time together, because we can't help you if we don't know you, and we want to get to know you. So that's the best place to start.
Sounds great. Well, thank you to you, Brett, and thank you to you, Dean. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
All right. And thank you for listening. Please like, follow, and share this podcast with your friends. Until next time, I'm Wendy McConnell.
Thank you for listening to Handcrafting Your Retirement. Visit our website at www.artisanwealthstrategies.com or give us a call at 317-660-2855. And don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Artisan Wealth Strategies. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.
Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor. Member FINRA, SIPC.